I don't suppose at this point that it's any secret that I am a bit of a VTuber nerd. I mean, there was that one video I did early on. I commonly go on tangents about agencies and talents. I am a VTuber and I'm making a horror game about VTubers. I like VTubers, but I also like horror. To my benefit, sometimes those two things cross over. This time that cross was in the form of me noticing a small YouTuber playing a game called Ruby's Vitten Party, a small horror game about the VTuber Ruby Whiska. And this little game got me thinking, is VTuber horror actually scary? Like, beyond pulling cheap jump scares or black spooky eyes? Can horror based on cute anime girls strike legitimate fear into your heart? I've been growing increasingly curious about this, and I have decided to finally take the plunge into finding out. Switch off those spotlights. Tonight's idol showdown is gonna be a little different. Alright, so we're gonna go back to the classic 3-game format today, and I was pretty careful about what I picked out so we can have a good balance of perspectives. Getting right to it, obviously I'm gonna look into Ruby's Vitten Party. What is a Vitten anyway? But I've also selected 2 Hololive adjacent games, those being the Biboo Tax and Hololive ERROR. My reasoning for grabbing these is not just because I like Hololive, which, if you aren't familiar, is a popular VTuber agency. I instead chose them because they reflect 2 game development perspectives, as one is a fan game and one is actually officially made by Hololive themselves. Not just published under their Holo Indie initiative, but directly commissioned and endorsed before Holo Indie was even a thing. So we should be able to get a good look on how a fan perceives and creates VTuber horror alongside how the company themselves can do it. And I think for something like this, we're gonna need a look at both Corpo and Indie. We're gonna start off with Biboo Tax, which is by far the simplest of the 3, but is by no means an uninteresting experience. So first off, what is this game? Well, it was created for HoloJam No. 2, a Hololive fan game jam by the developer Halfpot, and it mainly stars the Hololive talent Koseki Bijou, nicknamed Biboo by both herself and her fans. This game was apparently extremely difficult on initial release, leading to a new version being made post-game jam with adjusted difficulty. I played both, but beat the easier version first. As far as I can tell, the primary difference between the two is that the first version features faster enemy movement, fewer helpful pickups, and a few more environment hazards in the form of smaller platforms and additional walls. Mechanics are otherwise unchanged. The game uses a pixel art style and chiptune music. A simple art style aids a simple game, I think. I have no issues with it, it's well made. While the game doesn't feature much music, any ambiance or stingers it does have work well in the bit-crushed style and aid the creepy factor. Anyway, the story of this game is that Bijou, while taking a walk in some random creepy city for some reason, encounters fellow talent Nanashi Mume, who seems to have been doing the same. Bijou, being newer to the lineup than Mume, decides to try to break the ice with cringy Gen Z humor.
No! God, please, no!
Which Mume does not enjoy. 2 bouts of it is all it takes to transform the girl into a horrifying apparition, which Bijou notices and is quick to get away from. And thus, the main objective is established: get away from Mume. The mechanics start off simple. It reminds me a lot of older Sonic EXE games where the enemy is always after you and you've just gotta platform well enough to keep them a good distance away. Mume starts off pretty slow, so it's easy enough to get to the first checkpoint. But you will be encountering these black portals, and on getting close to them, Mume will teleport to their exact location, which is often much closer to you than she might have been before. This allows her to always remain close to you. I like this mechanic. It's a good replacement for making the enemy annoyingly fast, just so that you can't leave them behind. Avoid that though, and we're introduced to the checkpoints of this game in the form of flower gardens created by Mume's close friend Sarah's Fauna. Mume can't chase us in here, so these are a good opportunity to catch your breath. Although do be warned, checkpoint progress doesn't save if you exit the game. It does if you just quit to menu. There's nothing to do in here, so it's back out to the grind. The game warns us that Mume is getting angrier and her speed will be much faster from now on. Still, I didn't find her as difficult as some bits of the platforming. In segment 2, we're introduced to springs. They're a good quick way to evade Mume, but do be careful not to land on her head. I didn't mention them before, but this game also features NPCs. Besides Fauna from earlier, there are other Hololive members you can speak to in the platforming segments. And while you're doing so, Mume can't move, so they can be used as temporary breakpoints. Besides that, they're useful in in what they say, too. They can have some humor thrown in, but they give genuine advice on how to beat their corresponding segment. For example, Narissa Ravencroft can be found here in segment 2, and tells you the correct path to take when you come across 3 branching paths later in the area. Taking the wrong path can be fatal, as it's difficult to evade Mume in such a small corridor, so that advice comes in handy. Getting to the next checkpoint, things get a little more complicated. Another mechanic is introduced, throwing pebbles. You can carry however many you want with no limits, and fire them with the left mouse button. They can be used as an extra jump or to stun Mume for a short period, but be warned, she is not unable to kill you while stunned, although I think she should be. You will need to get good at throwing these, because wasting too many can result in you being unable to clear parts of the next areas. Another NPC, Ninomai Inanis, warns you about this. Unlike in this checkpoint, pebbles won't respawn after being picked up. Wasting pebbles isn't a huge concern in segment 3, but segment 4 is when it gets bad, as Mume's rage reaches its peak and she's at her fastest now. Not to mention the fact that pebbles are a lot scarcer here, so don't be an idiot. Segment 5 is even worse. Mume has distorted the city layout so much that it would be impossible to navigate without the power of Australia, graciously provided by Hagos Bales in the form of anti-gravity pads. Now you'll have to quickly adapt to throwing pebbles upside down, which is not very easy when combined with a frustrating quirk that makes Bijou unable to jump while pressing against a wall with reversed gravity. This part took me the most attempts by far. Never been that good at anti-gravity stuff, not gonna lie. At the very least, you'll get a lot of pebbles to do this with. Persevere and you will be able to make one last break for freedom, though it seems hopeless until Mume is blocked off by Kylo Kowalskia, who begins to spout off vocal tests, confusing both Mume and Bijou, before using her perceived results and her observations of Mume to conclude that she's a Diogen type of spirit, which immediately turns her back to normal. It takes a phasmophobia nerd. And that was the Biboo Tax. So, was that scary? I'd say not really. However, it was engaging, which I feel matters more. It doesn't have to lean super hard into the horror when I feel like the real scares come from your close brushes with Mume and with failure. Still, its good sound design and visual aesthetic make it easier to establish a sense of unease. Another plus is that it never feels unfair. It always feels like if you fail, it's entirely on you, and it's not drastically difficult to figure out a way around a tough area when the checkpoints aren't unforgiving, so you're encouraged to try again. Even if you know nothing about Hololive, I'd really recommend this game. It's a decent platforming challenge. Just be warned, you are not gonna get half the references, and I probably couldn't explain them if I tried. Moving on. Next up, our officially licensed entry, Hololive ERROR, the oldest of our bunch of games, published in September 2022 by CoverCorp and developed by Mogura Inc., a Japanese development company that specializes in VR. It is primarily a walking simulator type game that aims to tell a story more than it aims to provide innovative gameplay, but it still has some tricks up its sleeve. You play as a journalist for an occult magazine who has come to the town of Aogami to document strange events occurring there. One moment, he's in his hotel room, but the next, he's entangled in a paranormal phenomena. Will we figure out how exactly all this came to be? Let's find out. Off the bat, I gotta say that all the 2D art direction in this game is phenomenal. It's appropriately morbid paired with the somber violin soundtrack and animation. I wish there was more of it in the game. Getting into the experience, though, thankfully there are English subtitles for those of us who don't quite have time for Japanese lessons yet. Our main character recounts the reason for his trip to Aogami before waking up in his hotel room, where we have the opportunity to observe the items in it. One lets us in on some information on how Aogami came to be a ghost town, plagued by constant natural disasters and missing persons reports, which led people to become distrustful of living there. As we explore the other parts of the room, someone knocks at the door, but no one's outside the peephole when we look. From there, mysterious things continue to happen in our room before we once again check the peephole and see a stranger outside, before we are then whisked away to the halls of Aogami High. On the walls are papers we can check out that reveal the frightening rumor of an obsessed art student who reached the point of using her own blood to paint, resulting in her spirit wandering the art room in the future, always looking for more paint. After that light reading, we're able to roam the empty, dark hallways of the school. As we walk, we're plagued by the spirits of past students, although they do not try to harm us. It's more a museum of scares as things fall from the walls and the shadows of the girls who went here take up their positions at their old desks. It's not until we enter an open classroom that things start taking a really bad turn. A radio sits on a desk, replaying an intercom broadcast that retells the art room rumor, and it is near a flashlight that we can pick up and use to more closely examine a photo on the ground. But as we try to leave, we're locked in as ghosts roam the halls outside and the broadcast increases in volume and distortion. And then, the halls are left in complete darkness. It's at least nice of those ghosts to wait till we have a light source to trip the breaker. Despite the freaky occurrences, we have nowhere else to go than up, and so up we go, though we are beginning to be harassed by the girl from the main menu, whose appearance resembles talent Tokino Sora. Though there is something to mention, none of the representations of Hololive talents in this game share the same names as their real-life counterparts, interestingly. Here, Sora is referred to as Shino, and earlier we heard the voice of Kanade, whose real counterpart is Amane Kanada. A funny side note is that in 2023, a year after this game came out, a Hololive talent with the actual name of Kanade debuted under the device branch of Hololive. After a few appearances from Shino, the school begins to tremble and appears to succumb to the effects of an earthquake, leaning to the side with rubble strewn around. Tremors continue as we walk on, the debris only getting worse before we're accosted by a girl crawling rapidly towards us on the floor. And then, we awaken back in our room, but with a new addition to our desk, a bracelet with 3 bells. We can pick up the recording device on our desk now and play back our findings, providing a more detailed look into what we just went through back there. There isn't anything else to do in here for now though, so to trigger progress, we check the peephole to see the crawling girl from before limp down the hall. She triggers our TV to turn on and present a news report on the landslide that devastated the school, and checking the peephole again after that transports us once again to the high school, but seemingly to a past version of it this time, with older architecture. From here, it's more walking and scaring. It doesn't take long for the resident interior decorator to finish the new paint job though. We are too impatient to wait for it to dry, however. That's pretty upsetting to her, so she starts throwing stuff at us. Reasonable reaction. The end of this bit is when we are presented with our first important choice. I did not mention yet that this game has multiple endings, and here is when we decide which one we will get. Each path corresponds to one or multiple. We will go over all 3 after we get the first, and likely most common one, which has us continuing into the art room ahead. We find ourselves now not in an art room, but in a pool of spider lilies, encountering Shino directly here. She simply wakes us up back in our hotel room, where a new recording is available, recounting the art room rumor in different detail than before. After listening, we can find a desk from the school in our bathroom, and a photo of 2 students together triggers a fear stinger to play. It doesn't seem like we've seen them before. After this, our phone rings and a female voice threatens us. Now outside our door, there is a moving subway car. The time for questioning ghost logic has long since passed, so let's go for a ride. Something I noticed in this segment is the artistic disconnect between the world and those who inhabit it. We can see realistic people in the advertisements, but we're dealing with anime girls. It feels a little immersion breaking to compare the two. Anyway, proceeding forwards has us encounter one of the students from before, Inugami Korene, who's going by Akane here. She demands we give her back Yuka, and pushes us before running away. Following her, we see Shino again and get our flashlight back, but we can't progress past this car. I want to give compliments to one scare here that I think is pretty cool. This slamming we hear that produces a fading handprint on the window, as if someone we can't see is trying to break out. After finding a half-eaten chocolate bar on a windowsill, we can exit the subway car back into the modern high school, where we encounter a shadowy Usada Pekora, or Uzuki here, who flashes us with a camera and leaves a photo behind. It's the same photo as we had in the hotel room, but now the cat girl is missing. Assumedly, this is the Yuka that Akane was missing. Now that Uzuki has turned our flashlight to atoms, we must rely on her camera to navigate. Ahead, there's a frustrated note from Akane lamenting the loss of Yuka and noting that no one even remembers who she was. She blames this disappearance on a new girl in town. Yet ahead, we can find Yuka feebly trying to escape a hallway, although she disappears in a flash. We can leave through the door she was trying to get through to find that it's connected to the subway, where Akane, seemingly aware of Yuka's previous presence, cries out her name. It looks to me like Yuka was trapped outside before and we merely switched perspectives for a moment. Continuing on down the cars, we need to continually flash to rid the way of scattered desks and other furniture, and as we do so, a strange man can be seen groveling amongst it. My theory is that this is the protagonist's grandfather on his first expedition to Aogami, but whoever it is, after a breach of personal space, we get our flashlight back just in time to see Yuka executing a flawless backwards chair scoot in our direction before stopping, where we can choose to either approach her or ignore her. Both have the same result if we do not pick up the note she leaves behind when she disappears after approaching her. This result being us trapped on the subway car with Akane stuck running in an infinite loop while Shino laughs at it all on the chair in front of us, all while hands pound on the outside of the window and Yuka fruitlessly fruitlessly attempts to escape from inside. Afterwards, we awaken in our hotel room and are attacked by the strange man from before. In one last recording, we confirm that every missing person from before was last spotted in Aogami Station, where we were just at, too. And then, before we can exit our room again, the strange man comes back to finish the job. Back at the high school, potentially sometime in the past or in a sort of purgatory, Shino picks up our discarded watch. She turns to leave, but before she does, advises us to try and free ourselves next time. And that is ending 1, 404 not found, implying we didn't find something. So let's go back and fix that. Okay, so for the next 2 endings, we're gonna have to switch off to someone else's footage since I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, but Yuka never leaves behind a note for me to pick up when she disappears, so I haven't been able to get any other endings. So to get the other bits of story, we need to do some things differently. For the true ending, we must collect and examine everything after starting a new game. This includes going a bit out of the way for some easily missed collectibles. One such collectible is a note that Shino will drop nearby after you pick up the flashlight. It requires you to backtrack a little. Then, when you get to the diverted path in the bloody school, don't go forwards to the art room. Instead, take the right path. This triggers new scares to occur, after which we are then forced to go to the art room, where there is actually a room now with a different school photo than any we've seen. We also find the art student's paintbrush here and a painting made with her blood. Remember to examine everything here too. As you do so, you'll see Shino walk by as another girl insists Dusky's translation attempt that it's not working over and over again, coinciding with the note on the nearby door. Now, when you enter Chapter 5, in the place of the scary man standing in your room, Shino should be there instead. The game will continue as normal from this point on, up until you get to the train again. Remember to keep examining everything, even usable pickups like the camera. When you encounter Yuka in the train, pick up the note she leaves when she disappears after you approach, and this should cause Shino to appear in your room when you wake up instead of the scary man. She'll leave behind a photo and you must pick it up. Now you'll be sent back to the modern high school and find notes describing old human sacrificial rituals that used to take place in Aogami and how they may be connected to the town's unfortunate curse. You're then led into the older high school, which is being racked by tremors, all while the furniture in the classrooms floats ominously and the doors continuously slam. Eventually you can reach the art room once again and take a right, where you will find the rumored painter girl, who turns out to be the same girl that's been attacking us randomly throughout all the endings. She frustratedly chips at a painting as Shino steps over and looks at it. The two disappear as your vision warps into the subway once again, where you can find Yuka and Akane sitting together. Progress forwards to find Yuka following Shino into the next car, and then Akane running, yelling her name, but this time, we know why. Keep walking, and the train car stops abruptly before Shino appears in front of you, proclaiming that she will never forgive this, and entering into the brightly lit outside of the train car. Following her places you back in the modern high school, where Shino questions why you're here and why you press forward. She tries to stop you from heading into a collapsed corridor, but you do so anyway as chairs fly at you, pursuing the man from before at the end of the hallway. Shino teleports ahead of you and attempts to stop him to no avail. You are then placed back in the shrine from before with Shino, who apologizes and insists you shouldn't be here, implying that she was the reason everything happened to Aogami. But she provides you with an escape and implores you to learn the other story and about who she really is. Before we close, we're then placed into the shoes of your grandfather, speaking to Shino personally about the stories of Aogami, which she promises to tell. And that's the true ending. 202 accepted. For ending 2, the middle ground, if you don't get every collectible and instead just take the right path instead of heading into the art room, you will not be attacked by the scary man in your room like Chapter 7. Shino will be there, but she will not leave a photo after she disappears. You'll be placed in the modern high school like before, leading into the older one, but things will be less intense. You'll still find Shino and the painter girl, but instead of going to the subway, you'll get sent back to the modern high school, where Shino is confused to see you. She will still try to stop you from entering the broken hall, and the sequence will play out like before, up until Shino attempts to stop the man, where you will instead wake up in your hotel room again instead of with Shino at the shrine. There will be a knocking at the door, where she will then appear outside the peephole and inform you that you're not on the right track just yet to close out ending 2, 403 Forbidden. So, that was a lot for what feels like very little gameplay. But you know, I don't think this was trying to be an engaging experience for your hands per se. I think it was more meant for your mind. How philosophical. Was Error scary though? I'd say so. It didn't get me in the traditional "eek, I've jumped" sort of way, but it managed to instill a sense of dread when certain parts of the story were revealed, like when you realize why Akane was running down the hall when she was watching her friend be taken, and the pieces click together and you're like, oh. There was also a sense of sadness you get from the whole thing when you're watching the shadows of girls literally running for their lives and you know exactly what happened to them despite it. I guess on the bright side, you can rest assured they're all doing just fine in the real world. Hololive ERROR works well as a higher budget form of what a visual novel usually tries to be, and I think it's worth looking at, but perhaps not playing, since the whole idea is to learn the story and I kind of already told you it. Well, you know that other story Shino mentioned? She was talking about the official YouTube animated manga version of it, available through a link in game and on Hololive's Japanese YouTube channel, with English subtitles provided. I won't spoil that one for you, so if you want to learn more about the tragedy of Aogami from the students' points of view, and get more of an explanation on the events seen in the game, such as the mystery of Shino's eyes changing color sometimes, I recommend it. I found it very interesting. But with that said, I think we have yapped quite enough about Hololive for now, so let's finally get into our little indie star. You've probably heard of this one, Ruby's Vitten Party, a game about the VTuber Ruby Whiska, developed by Cryptcode. The reason you've likely seen it before is because it was played by a small YouTuber by the name of, Market Flyers, I think? I've never heard of him. This one's not affiliated with any corporation, so it is a good look into what independent VTubers can do with horror. Not that agency fans aren't as creative or anything, but they tend to have different ideas, so it's beneficial to look both ways. Ruby's Vitten Party was honestly my favorite out of the games in this video. I really enjoyed the mechanics it introduced as well as its art style. The game definitely leans less into the subtle type of horror and more into the active in-your-face kind. You start off the game not in the party but in an arcade. You see, in order to attend the party we gotta get a ticket. We're not really officially invited yet. It's not guaranteed that you'll get a ticket on any of these machines, but you can keep pressing them until you do. The sad face doesn't mean you can't use the machine again. I'm not really sure I understand why it's actual chance and not that just you get it from a random machine each time. Seems like a bit of a time waster, but it's not a huge deal. Although I'd say there's absolutely zero point in having to gamble to erase your save file. Yeah, it's still enabled on this machine too. You can also stick to gambling on the machines to the right after you beat the normal game to play through it again on hard mode. I'll cover the differences in that mode later. When you eventually get the ticket to be allowed in, you'll be warped directly to the party and meet what I assume are the Vittens all at the table, with Ruby behind them busting it down.
Let me break it down for you, Mark.
The objective currently is to speak to her, so that we do. She insists on us meeting all the Vittens, so our goal now is to go around and pet them all, though the black one at the table that was there before seems to have left. After petting most of them, a clatter can be heard upstairs. Heading up there, the atmosphere deteriorates, but we can find the black Vitten hiding in the hall. Petting it makes the spookiness fade, and we can head back down to speak with Ruby again and get this party started. She's pretty interested in starting it off with dinner. Unfortunately, what that means for us is that we end up locked in a closet with the one forgotten Vitten, who gives us advice for escaping Ruby and provides us with a red key and a heart monitor. Then we're on our way. As soon as we unlock the door to the bathroom we're in, the chase begins. We are now able to sprint with shift, and we need to find the 6 Vittens and place them at the table one by one. You might get lucky with the placement, you might not. Sometimes there are multiple Vittens in a room, and there may even be one in the starting area. You gotta comb everywhere every time since their locations are randomized. Not all are accessible at the start either. You will also need to fetch a blue key to open the door upstairs with a blue heart on it, and inside that door is a green key that you can use to unlock another corresponding heart door. At least one of these rooms will likely have a Vitten in it. While I think the green key always spawns in the blue room, the blue key's location is lightly randomized. It seems to favor the garage, but sometimes can be in a different room. I think it switches if a Vitten happens to spawn in the garage. Keeping all these things in mind gets a lot harder when we introduce Ruby to the mix. When she is active, Ruby will pursue you, but you can only move when the light is green. If you move for too long while it's red, you'll be caught instantly. However, there is a small grace period in case you forget. I enjoy this mechanic because it forces you to just sit and watch as the enemy walks right over to you, and you just gotta admit you screwed up and await the inevitable. It makes Ruby a lot more intimidating. I think if she were just chasing you all the time normally, she'd be kind of a pushover, but the whole forcing you to let her near you idea makes her much more of a threat. She's not always on your tail though. The light will go away after about 3 or 4 cycles, and you'll have free reign over the house for a short period. Oftentimes, this chase mechanic also forces you to remember the layout of the house and its landmarks. If you get caught in a closed-off room, such as the garage during the light sequence, it's hard to escape, so you gotta be mindful of when you check certain areas to avoid cornering yourself. Careful not to run too much for too long or your heart rate will go too high and you'll die of a heart attack. I generally decided to ease up on running during the Ruby free periods. It's best to remember that some rooms can be used to loop Ruby, particularly this balcony area with 2 doors. I found it easiest to be downstairs when Ruby spawned so that it would be almost guaranteed that she'd spawn down there with me. Then I could book it upstairs and run to the balcony door to get really good distance on her before the light went red. You can tell if she's near you by a static effect that plays over your screen, but it's tricky to know where she's spawned once the sequence begins, so that's why I liked the downstairs strat. Once you've gotten all the Vittens returned, Ruby will instantly despawn, and you'll be left alone in the dark house. From here, it's not immediately visually clear where you should go, and your objective is blank, but when Ruby initially disappears, you can hear a door opening. This is meant to signify that the black door in the downstairs kitchen is now open. It's good that there aren't threats during this part, since I imagine not everyone would immediately catch on to that. You'll have to head on in there now, where you'll find a door with a black heart on it. It's locked, so we're heading downstairs instead. Here there is a pile of Vittens not unlike the forgotten one from before, all presumably dead. In a room near them is a black key, and that key goes to the black heart door, which allows us to finally leave the house. Ending off the game, we can see Ruby watching us leave from the 2nd floor. She seems happy for us, but I ain't done with her. I want to make sure we cover everything, so that means we're going in for hard mode. I expected hard mode to just have differences in enemy speed and maybe number of Vittens or something, but I was pleasantly surprised that there were other differences. The most notable was that someone's feeling a bit more open. Otherwise though, Ruby does have new animations in this mode. Her dance is different, and when chasing you, she crawls on the ground as opposed to prancing like before. She also makes a wood creaking sound instead of heavy footsteps. And I can't tell if she did in normal mode, but she gets faster when you've collected more than 3 Vittens. She's also just faster in general, making this mode harder indeed. However, the ending of hard mode is the same as normal mode. And with that, we have covered all there is to see in Ruby's Vitten party. Was this one scary? I would say
Yes.
It was definitely putting in work, especially when I went back for hard mode. I was really underestimating Ruby's distance covering abilities, so often I ended up just having to watch her come right up and I would be praying for her to go away in time, often to no avail. This game really shines in the sound design department. I liked the ambiance and the scary chimes when the lights changed color, and the mechanics. Would have been easy to have her just chase you around like always, but they chose to be different. The enemy may not be very scary in design, but the way she's used is clever. This is a pretty genius form of advertising for an indie VTuber, honestly. Making your own game, especially a horror one, is a good way to expose yourself to an audience that wouldn't otherwise ever see you around, with Twitch's poor discovery rate in mind. So keep on, Ruby Whiska. You have made an impact. And with that, we're done for now. I thought this would be an interesting topic to cover with my life quickly being taken over more and more by VTubers, which isn't necessarily, like, bad, but of course it triggered a bit of a fixation. Especially with me recently having had my own VTuber debut, finally, and having gotten back to streaming. I also thought that perhaps I could learn a thing or two from these games so that my own VTuber adjacent horror game can be better. Did I actually learn anything? Well, only time will tell, but perhaps you can give me a bit of early feedback by checking out our first gameplay reveal. And I know I haven't recently given you guys anything to talk about in the comments, even though I said I wanted to, so how about you tell me who your favorite VTuber is and why? Doesn't have to be Corpo, it can be anybody. Could even be Doug Doug. I'd say that is a pretty cultured answer. Anyway, that's all from me. This has been Glamrock Dusky, and remember, have a phasorific day!